Yeah. So my name is Andrew Jacobson. I'm the curator for Reframing Americana, a confluence of narratives. It was a significant presentation because there were so many firsts. It was the first fine art presentation during Art All Night in Washington, D.C., my hometown. It was the first public art presentation of fine art in Franklin Square Park. And it was an opportunity for three tremendously talented African-American artists that live and make work in Washington, D.C., to present their work at such a significant level. The dialogue took place between Franklin Square Park, which is a public setting, and the park at 14th Street, which is a historic restaurant and lounge operated by Marc, who's an icon in D.C. and national nightlife. And so we were really proud to be able to put something so special and compelling together to bring out people who wouldn't ordinarily mix, to have dialogue. There was three monumental visual artworks, one by Halim Flowers, who's to my left, and two by Clarence James, who's to his left. And then there was a video work from Phillip Fenty, who's a frequent collaborator. He's done some work with Black Flea Market in Los Angeles and also with Telfar, an iconic fashion brand. So we're just so delighted to be able to put something like this together because really we self-funded. We did have some support from the Downtown Bid. Downtown Bid DC is a downtown business improvement district, and definitely want to send a big thanks to them and their grounds team for pulling this together at such short notice and actually erecting the monument in Franklin Square Park that supported Clarence's two works. And Marc Barnes, for doing the build out at the park at 14th Street and kind of changing the timbre of that space to accommodate what we were trying to do and a stage for Halim's live painting. But largely, self-funded. But, the artistic community, the fine arts community in DC banded together to support this exhibition and presentation. It's still banding together. Lafayette Barnes is helping us here in the studio with the videography and the documentation of this conversation. He's from the Washington Bridge and Washington Informer magazine, and a big thanks to him and his team because we see the need for this dialogue. We see the need to shine light on the DC art community, on fine art in Washington, DC, particularly in the wake of a pandemic, as our government and business community are trying to navigate through that space and figure out how they're going to revitalize the downtown area. It's clear to most everyone who's involved that there is a need for more investments in the art and creative economy, more activations, whether it be visual art, which is what we put together, music, theater, whatever the case may be. There's a significant need for entertainment in and throughout the downtown area in Washington, D.C. And so being able to showcase a presentation like this and allow the public to participate and engage in this dialogue was really important because without them seeing proof of concept, it's very hard to articulate why that need is present and how the art can help solve one of our city's most pressing issues. Secondarily, just moving into the work and kind of the curatorial statement, the genesis for the show was really having a conversation with Marc Barnes, with Gloria Nauden, who also big thanks to her for helping produce this whole event and bring this all together, and Halim Flowers. We went to the Rubel collection here in DC, and we all toured the museum. And as we were talking, I think Marc got really inspired to do a fine art presentation at the park. He felt it would be really transformative. It would bring a new demographic and new audience to his historic venue. And so we all decided to do this. And in that dialogue, Halim and I are both from Washington, D.C., and so we started talking about, what it is to be a native Washingtonian, talking about indigeneity. And, from there, that conversation evolved into him making a work that's representative of, not only D.C. natives, but also just indigenous people like Native Americans. And the conversation about how there were indigenous people in the Washington, D.C. region prior to us even. So that dialogue then transitioned into, conversations about when you're a kid, you might play like cowboys and Indians, and I had remembered in my curatorial process that I had seen Clarence James's work, and he had done a series on Black cowboys, and I thought it was really powerful and significant, because when I think about a cowboy, my mind automatically goes to a narrative of like whiteness. It's like some white guy in the West, doing the cowboy thing. And it's not just that. In fact, I think in Clarence's research, and he can expand on that, it was, upwards to like 25, maybe even 50% of cow hands, if I remember correctly, were the original cowboys, and they were Black. So that cowboys and Indians dynamic kind of came into play. And then also there was a physical representation of the Montgomery Brawl. If people recall, over the summer, I think it was in early August of this year, 2023, there was an incident in Montgomery where a riverboat operator was attacked. He was Black. He was attacked by white boaters, and it resulted in a brawl where somebody got hit with a folding chair. And in that interaction, I felt like it was referential and that we needed the inclusion of a folding chair in our presentation by the statue, which was erected to support Clarence James's work, because it was placed right next to a granite statue of Caandor John Barry, who was the first admiral in the United States. I think he was appointed by George Washington, if I'm not mistaken. But, he was the first admiral in the Navy. And especially growing up in D.C., you see this proliferation of statues everywhere, monuments. It's all, older white men. Generally, there's some relationship to war or some symbolism that's trying to be conveyed there. And they're upheld as these, like, iconic national figures. And so I felt that it was really significant, and Clarence agreed that we should put, a folding chair there as a statement, right? Because when we're not upheld, and even worse than that, attacked in our own communities, sometimes it calls for a response. And obviously it's not, with the sentiment that we would respond with violence, right? But it's just an objective reminder of how much work there is to do and where we stand. And so, out of that whole dialogue, I had remembered watching some of Phillip's video work, and really being inspired because, I'm a big student and fan of the greats, Arthur Jaffa, Khalil Joseph, great videographers and video artists. And Phil's work was very reminiscent of those bodies of work, despite him being a DC-based artist. And I really kind of fell in love with that energy and wanted to bring that, positive kind of representation of pop culture into what was otherwise a very serious, intense dialogue between these bodies of work of Halim and Clarence. And so that's kind of how this whole thing came about from my perspective. And I'm just so happy that we were able to share this, with everybody. So, yeah, I mean, like, while the work is one story, I also thought it was important to provide the audience an opportunity to hear from, the artists themselves. And so I give you all Halim flowers.
Yeah, for me, I think as a creative, it's my responsibility to not have partiality to any political spectrums, because I find them to be rather divisive, and thus far they have not proven to be efficient in developing just a quality lifestyle to the masses of people. Politics has, done nothing but just perpetuate imbalances. And the imbalances, the many have less and the few have more. So when I think about a topic like natives and indigenous people, I just feel like all people are indigenous to the earth. And man draws lines in the sand and in the ocean, and his obsession with identifying and quantifying people, places, and things in the human experience, he's developed these social constructions of like race, class, gender, creed, and borders and titles. And so we become like Indians and Americans and Africans, and then we break that down to Nigerians and Ghanaians, and to me it's just I don't buy into it. Is it real? Yes, it's a real social construction. It's definitely a real category that's been created. It's just as real as X-Men and Wolverine and Beetlejuice and all these other popular characters, people, places, and things that people have manufactured with their intellectual property. But for me, I just like to deal with humanity on a human level. I'm a philanthropist in the true meaning. I don't have to wait to Forbes to value me at billions of dollars to have love for humanity. A philanthropist, when you look at the etymological understanding of the word, phil is love and anthrop is humans, humankind. So for me, with my work, I always want to just begin with an intention of like love and create something that's loving in service of a loving intelligence so that we can love intelligently. And I didn't want to create a piece that I believe fed into this local, hyper-local DC narrative about you're just a native to DC if you were born within the 61 square miles, and anybody else who migrates here is not worthy of enjoying this space, because it is people who were born here that are economically getting pushed out. But, it's people who don't come from here and are bringing great value to the space. So I just wanted to remind people with the iconography and the text that I created in the work, that once again, love is the vaccine. Definitely encouraging people, instead of having the audacity to hope, because hope is the evidence of things unseen. I want to give people the audacity to love themselves first and then others from a genuine space, and not in a transactional commercial nature that I think the capitalist economic system manufactures in people. And hopefully I did a good job of just showing up, creating a body of work that was encouraging towards a more holistic, a more organic understanding of what it means to be a native or indigenous, just a humans populating this spinning planet where we all come from. We all eat from the fruits and vegetables and drink the water and breathe the same air. And to get people away from the parochial perspective of humanity that divides us into these borderlands and relating to these titles that we attach to these borderlands and these racial concepts and identities. So that was my understanding of what I really wanted to contribute to the project.
And Clarence, how did you feel about getting involved in this thing, and what did you feel like your work, represented for the project?
Well, I was excited when you reached out. Definitely, it's a big opportunity. I saw it as, or just a moment where we could do something special that could last. I think it's a big deal to do something public like that in a park. We think about city spaces, and parks are vital to that. And so some of the things you mentioned, we talked about where nationwide, how are the parks decorated? How are the parks adorned, right? What are the monuments we erect in this country, and for what reasons? And without making it like more racial than it is by nature, just, a lot of people don't like to have the uncomfortable conversation about certain realities in America, but it is the way it is, and it took. We can just say it happened the way it happened, right? And so it's not a random occurrence. So you go and you look at all the monuments, all the statues, and they're going to reflect a certain perspective. So I thought, what a great opportunity to have a powerful conversation over history and memory and imagery, iconography, like Halim mentioned. And these are really important things. So one thing I was telling people, like, immediately when we put it up, people started coming and enjoying the artwork, and they were intrigued and had things to say about it. And fortunately, I was still standing there, and this young kid, he went to Howard. I went to Howard University. I thought that was cool. And just being able to have a moment where we could talk about the reason for it, which really is, let's add to this story. We're in a studio and things get edited, the process of communication and the messaging. So what heroes do you grow up with, right? And I think it's a powerful moment to add to the narrative of what is America, why and how. Like you mentioned, most of the statues are military statues honoring the bravery and the glory of the conquering and creation of America, right? So if you share in that, oh man, you all right up there? If you share in that, hopefully everyone's okay. But yeah, if you share in that, that's kind of the idealism going on, right? So I do think it's a beautiful thing that in practice, we're not quite there yet, but how do you correct that? Okay, let's add literally some color to the situation. So when it comes to America, it's super important to acknowledge how diverse it really is. And it's founded on migration and immigration, and it is about the American dream, right? Rags to riches, being able to have a family and a home and a household, and good or bad, war plays a role in that, right? So those are certain heroes, right? What about the rest of everyone in America that contributes to it? If you consider yourself a black person in America, right? It's an interesting thing to consider, right? People you call it the diaspora, right? But again, just to emphasize, being here, being in America, you grow up with the images that are given to you in the media, given to you through commercials, movies, toys. One thing I mentioned to you is like people's first interaction with a cowboy is like Woody in Toy Story, just when you're a child. And it's kind of reinforced in different areas, kind of, and this is a common thing. And I talk about this a lot, so I kind of I don't want to harp on it because the more I talk about it, I'm almost like Morgan Freeman. Everyone remembers his comment about like, how do you stop race? And he's like, stop talking about it. And it's like there's a dichotomy to that, excuse me, because it's about memory and it's about images. So if you remove an image, then you remove a memory, and that's one angle of psychology, right? But I think what's more healthy is let's complete the picture. So you're not going to get to a point where it's not dominating the conversation and dynamic in America until you respect and give everybody their flowers, basically, or their credit, or just tell the story right, because you don't want to have groups of people feeling excluded, right? So I just thought it was a special moment to tell that story. Let's shed light on black Civil War soldiers that fought for freedom, right? Let's shed light on black cowboys that wrangled the West, right? That's one of the biggest American ideologies, or manifest destiny, and this whole concept of like it's our God-given right to like civilize these lands, and we're gonna establish cities and every nation, right? Like just that concept. What's a nation, right? So a nation being a people, right? Like if you look at it if there's nations within nations, it seems like almost, right? And it's a very polarizing atmosphere right now. But I think what we did is awesome, man. We erected our own monument. We added to the story, and we literally and figuratively colored in. You know what I'm saying? We added color to the picture. So I just think that was I was excited. And that's kind of what I think we accomplished. And, you know, hopefully even just, you know, over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I hope, you know, as many people as possible are impacted by it, even just walking by or driving by and just being like, what is that? Just sparking that.
Just like snowball to an avalanche, right? But it was just really great because it dovetails into the conversation about, you know, how that can spread into the community, the economic development, and also like just the energy, the vibrancy that can inspire people and incentivize, you know, these types of dialogues to happen. And also broader dialogues about how art can be the nexus for the next stage of how we reimagine downtown. And Phil, how do you feel like your video work kind of played its part in that? And where do you get your inspiration for the type of work that you do?
For sure. I get my inspiration from all kinds of places. And, you know, I appreciated listening to you guys talk about your work. I was thinking, you know, just like in experiencing y'all's work this weekend, how I saw some of the elements that you were describing just now in your conversation, in your work. I can definitely feel like the iconography. It feels like hieroglyphics, you know, to me, and that's one of the original sources of civilization and language. And in your work, you know, just like you were expressing this, like kind of like, you know, where cowboys come from, and like, you know, when people think about like, you know, Woody and like, you know, it's funny. It's just like the way that American pop culture, you know, is like such like a universal thing, right? That like so many people are touched by, and I think like largely what we're known for around the world. But when you like look at our story, it's like there's so many different serious pieces to it, you know, and a lot of this like amazing pop culture and art comes out of this pain, you know, comes out of like these narratives and these stories that a lot of people I think want to avoid, you know. My inspiration comes from really just falling in love with music and wanting to create visuals for the music that I was enjoying. I was studying the civil rights era and watching a lot of archival video during that from that time, and I was paying attention in particular to how the foreign press was a significant factor in the passing of the Civil Rights Bill, because they were capturing the way that Americans were being treated, specifically people of color, you know, African Americans were being treated inside the cities, while we were also agitating the Vietnam War. And so it just, that juxtaposition, you know, of like us looking to be a world police factor, while treating our own people, our own civilians, like, you know, like animals, it literally put pressure on the U.S. government to pass the Civil Rights Bill. And anyway, so at that point was when I decided to shift my focus from writing into video work. I was having an inner dialogue during that time, and I was just thinking that, you know, not everyone. I don't know. There's some.
You just want to wait a second.
Yeah,
it looks scary.
Yeah, just basically like what your inspo was and like how you arrived at the point of like creating that.
Right. So I was just thinking about this James Baldwin quote that I love. It's that the minstrel show is the cornerstone of American pop culture, and the other, you know, the dichotomy of that, or the other side of that that's interesting, is that it also got us a seat at the table. You know, it was largely what gave Black people a seat at the table. And as you know, as everyone knows, you know, at this point in time that we've now had a black president and you know, a lady, a woman, black vice president, which is, you know, obviously a big deal. So, you know, with the highest offices in the land. So, art is great at allowing people to reimagine life as it is, right? And yeah, my inspiration for my video work comes from everything that I see and touch. You know, just mainly the desire to be a storyteller, a visual storyteller, and keep that tradition alive. So, you know, anything from Aesop fables and little, you know, imagery that's in my mind from things like that to, you know, books like When the People Could Fly, things I used to read when I was a kid to, you know, Roald Dahl books and, you know, things like that. You know, Matilda and the Witches. And these are just like some of my favorite books and stories that, you know, have like left and really made a crazy imprint on my mind and on my work, and just things that I pull from when I'm looking to kind of get a little weird and, you know, a little abstract and kind of push the boundaries of what's comfortable or, you know, what's familiar, and add a little bit of something extra to the story. I think those kinds of details are what stand out in people's minds when people are experiencing art. Those little weird quirky things. So those are the kinds of things I like to implement in my work. And yeah, I was honored to be a part of this experience with all of you all. And thanks again, Andrew, for putting this whole thing together. And thanks to Lafayette and Gloria for organizing this artist talk today. I appreciate you all.
Yo, can I just make a comment on that? Those books have awesome illustrations. I totally feel you. It makes me think of like James and the Giant Peach and other books like that. That like, yeah, as you're a kid, that kind of give you permission to like be a little weird or to like be yourself, you know, be a little different and not feel like, you know, you have to conform to stuff. And you're making me think too, something I didn't add, but it's really crucial, the images. So like that's the big thing I would say about the artwork that I provided to the situation. Is the biggest thing is the image. Like watching your video was really cool because it had so many strong reference points and current reference points, and it gave you moments of nostalgia and things like that. So I feel like everything kind of tied together in a way, like you mentioned, like Halim's work, almost hieroglyphic, like bringing you way back to like an earlier form of language almost, right? And then it's like pop culture to me is brands and intellectual property, these things you grew up with, right? So like a cowboy, and like think about all the movies you've seen about Civil War and these different time periods, and they kind of give you, they're like imagination aids, you know, and then you can kind of form a self-image. And so yeah, it's super important what images are out there. And one thing I was mentioning the other day that I just wanted to mention now is like just how important that is. Growing up as a kid, and what images do you have? Who are your role models? What gives you those moments where you feel like permission to be yourself, you know, and to be free to strive for something, you know, beyond just athletics? So you said like, minstrel show, that's such a interesting comment to me, because that was an opening. Now, yeah, at first they got the first it's white guys doing blackface. Exactly. Right? And then it opens a space for a black actor to exist, right? And it kind of
in front of the camera.
In front of a camera, right? Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, the museum, the African American National Museum, has a lot of interesting like posters and advertisements from like that time period. It's really interesting to look at it and be like, this was like the first attempt to market black culture in America. Like, very interesting.
I wanted to just like really quick just bring this topic into the conversation, because like just like nobody has touched on it. There's this trending term that's going around, is like black futurism, Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
What do you guys?
heard
What do y'all?
Afrofuture.
What do y'all think about that? What's y'all's opinion on that? I just like that was something that I'm interested to hear you all, in particular. Like,
I don't
say
think
y'all
it's
thoughts on
like,
it.
for me, I don't think it's anything new. If you look at like Dr. King, who was one of the few African Americans who has a monument in D.C., and a lot of it is I have a dream. You know, so much is, and Malcolm speaks about the American nightmare. Both of them, I think, were futurists. They were working in the now more for those who came in the future to have better opportunities.
Right. Yeah.
This with the whole Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act. So I just think like, and even like when you think about the necessary cognitive dissonance that has been necessary to cope with living in America when you're socially constructed as black, from institutional slavery in the private industry to transferring it to the public industry through the 13th Amendment. And, you know, the Jim Crow, and Jim Crow is a minstrel character from Britain. Who a horrific American experience
I didn't even know that.
gets named after this British minstrel performer. And so just in me, someone who existed in the new incarceration, everything post 13th Amendment legalizes involuntary servitude and slavery if one is duly convicted of a felony. So experiencing that new institutional slavery in the public government sector for 22 years, and knowing what it's like to like have to like think about the future, because the present moment is so cruel and unusual to the human condition that we've been compelled as African people in America to think about the future because the present is so
For the sake of survival.
inhumane.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you get the Negro spirituals from, where you talk about that content that's created out of that pain.
Yeah.
The ragtime, the Negro spirituals, the
blues.
gospels,
Yeah.
the blues.
Yeah.
We're crying about what we're going through now, but it's like a change gonna come.
So it's like an effort of like the preservation of the imagination.
Yeah, a change gonna come.
Yeah.
I Have a Dream, Octavia Butler. You know, we've always experienced a horrific present moment that compelled us to like work towards a better future
And think ahead.
for others.
Yeah.
Right, and to think ahead, because we don't want our children to go through what we're going through. So I think like even when Kanye West mentioned that like we need to change it to Black Future Month, I think we've always been like creating content for the future, whether it was the Civil Rights Bill or a change gonna come, or I Have a Dream. Right, we just the present moment is so heavy when you're socially constructed as black. Right, it kind of compels us towards activism,
Right.
and you know, and advocating for what, a better now, but really a better future. So, and like I said, just the Octavia Butlers, the Dr. Kings, the Sam Cooks,
Bell Hooks.
Bell Hooks. You know, it's James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's always been
That's
there.
interesting.
Yeah.
I like what you said about the whole, see, and like that's kind of, now I ain't gonna lie, man, like I don't even really think I know what Afrofuturism is. But I'm gonna just take kind of what you introduced and what he introduced and say what I think about what we're talking about, because that makes a lot of sense. And one thing, see, Andrew mentioned Derek Adams, and he has the Last Resort residency, which the whole concept is about basically leisure, like relax. And like what you're saying is we're like epigenetically PTSD'd from like 300 like you know, so you're like you're 4 or 5 generations deep of trauma. You're really been in fight or flight, like your parents' generation and grandparents. So you get in a situation where that's also, again, that's the beauty of like the Ivy League, and like that was the whole idea of like college and a university is like, give me time, give me space to think.
Yeah.
You know, like literally. So it's like, and with that, the whole world is open, right? There's, you know, all the possibilities are open, but till you really can take a moment, and that's what I feel like with that Afrofuturism, like Halim is mentioning. Afrofuturism, if we define it like that, Afrofuturism is way back, you know, in terms of just like, because it has been like that, and we have to project our, you know, our will into the future. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Yeah, and I don't know if it means that, because when you said Afrofuturism, my first thought was like black people in Star Wars or something like that. You know, like like something like that, like. But that's part of it too. That's what I like about the new era of like, what's it, Issa Rae?
Yeah, Issa Rae.
Issa, yeah, like people like that, or what's his name, Jordan Peele, and all these. There's a big opening of like black creativity, and like, yeah, every story, again, right? You start with the minstrel, you go through the whole, you know, and we got to do all these slave movies. We got to get through everything, right? The branding of stereotype of, you know, we got to get through it. It sells, okay? People going to the movies to see 12 Years a Slave. We all want to see the Django and things like that, right? And it's just progressing to where it's like, nah, like I can do anything. I could create a whole fantasy universe, you know, like they said, or like look at the Game of Thrones. Even recently, there's no black people in Game of Thrones. I'm sorry if I don't know if y'all seen it or not, but
it's hardly any black.
But
people.
It's
like one or two.
Yeah, but they obviously got the feedback though, because then on the newest one that they did, now they're sharing. You know, they're including a whole nother aspect to it. So I feel that, man. Yeah, we always projecting our future, and yeah, that's why I think what we did is super important. It's very, it's almost like you said, it's like planting the seed for the future. You want young people to feel more free and more empowered. So I do that. That's fire. Yo, yeah, that's really what we're doing every day.
I also just wanted to touch on really quick that geographically, DC is below the Mason-Dixon line, making it the South. And to me, DC has a lot of Southern mannerisms, and I think it often isn't necessarily considered a Southern city, but that's also a major source of inspiration for me when I'm making art. I always look to incorporate Southern culture into my work, Southern imagery. DC is also one of the oldest black cities in the
chocolate cities
in the country, right?
Shout out to Detroit.
So it's like, it being like a very old city and also having this Southern influence. Those are just also kind of key things that are always swimming in my subconscious when I'm creating. I just wanted to touch on that. I think a lot of people don't really consider it a Southern town, but it definitely is.
Because they forgetting because it's changing the landscape of the town.
Yeah, that's definitely a valid point. I just want to do rapid fire real quick and see how you all feel that, we collectively and also you as like individual artists can contribute to bring the Afrofuturism conceptually to present to be able to manifest change for future generations. Halim, how do you see yourself doing that?
Just in consistent commitment to developing the visual language. Mm-hmm. They said John Coltrane was in a hotel and he was practicing the horn, and the people downstairs, like they was upstairs banging just now. Someone said, "Man, tell that guy to get off his horn." And he was like, "Oh, okay." So he got off his horn. They said he just did this for 2 hours.
Wow.
With his fingers. So for me, it's just like, continuously just staying committed to like unconditional love and transferring that to the visual language. And no matter whether it comes out on canvas or sneakers or fashion or music or books or podcasts or interviews, just that constant work on self and love, to where the love becomes supreme.
Clarence?
I feel you. What was it exactly the question?
Just how you feel like you can contribute to manifesting Afrofuturism through your work today.
Yeah, I like in general what he said, but it's really about I guess what I'll say is the engagement, just finding opportunities to because the children are the future, right? So however you can engage in the community, whether and that really is like through a school. What can you do that's going to get the attention of young people if you're not physically in a school. But I just think being aware of like the future we're creating. So don't forget about that. To me, that's I won't say that's like the spirit tip, but definitely don't forget about that. I think really the focus is just every individual person being inspired. So for me, that's what I'm trying to do. The artwork I make is very emotional. It can be very colorful. So I'm trying to make a personal connection with somebody, or I'm trying to have them have a introspective moment. So I think that's a key or a foundational thing for everybody. Just kind of learning yourself, just kind of having that moment of self-esteem or that moment of just, pride or joy in something you did or something you created or somebody you helped. So that's what I'd say.
I'm really into transcendentalism, and like Ralph Waldo Emerson and like Walt Whitman and those guys who were looking to tap into spirituality through nature. And so just my message to young artists is just to put yourself in spaces outside of your regular, everyday norm, The world is so much bigger than like the blocks we're raised on and, the streets that we grow up in. Get out of DC, get out of whatever city it is that you come from or place that you come from. Go see the world. There's so much education out here that, exists outside of the walls of school. And I think one of the biggest ways to teach yourself things and is really to go travel. And so and if you can't travel and you live in DC, Rock Creek Park is a great resource to tap into nature and to connect with nature. And I think it's also one of the most constant sources of inspiration we can have. It's like it's constantly changing and it's never the same.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. I really appreciate you all and all of your insight, input, and the process, and the delivery and execution. Again, a big thank you to Gloria Nauden, the producer, Lafayette Barnes, our videographer, the people at Downtown Business Improvement District, the park at 14th Street, Marc Barnes and his whole team for making all of this possible. And we hope to be able to share more of these presentations with you all in the future. Thank you.